to the Rescue, Chapter 6. Tom Little found Hildy the cat in Henry Big's room. Henry was Mr. and Mrs. Big's son. He was about Tom's age. Tom liked many of the things Henry liked. Henry and his friends often played astronaut. Tom loved to watch them. And whenever the Littles visited another tiny family, which wasn't often, Tom and his friends played astronaut too. Tom and Lucy Little had known Henry Big all their lives. He was very important to them. They thought of him as a friend. The two little children had spent many happy hours watching Henry and his friends. They would have watched more, but their father said too much watching wasn't good for them. Henry, of course, didn't know the little children were alive. It was a rule of the Littles that they would never let the big people know they were living with them. The little family liked the big family, but they didn't trust them. They didn't know what the Bigs would do if they found out that there were tiny people living in their house. All the tiny people in the Big Valley felt the same way. They didn't want to take chances, so Tom and Lucy never tried to talk to Henry Big. When Tom found Hildy in Henry's room, he saw there was going to be trouble. Henry was playing with the cat, as he often did before breakfast. He was lying on his bed with Hildy on his stomach. The cat was batting at some small ball tied to a paddle that Henry held over his chest. "Golly," said Tom to himself, "we need that cat, and there she is playing games." Tom usually whistled a secret whistle when he wanted Hildy to come to him. Most cats won't come when they are called unless they are hungry. Hildy was like that too. Most of the time she didn't pay attention to Henry when he called her. She would listen to Tom, though. Why she did was a mystery. Maybe, Mr. Little had once said, it is because Tom was the first to tame her, and he needs her for important things, not just to play with. This time, Tom didn't dare use the secret whistle to call Hildy. Henry might hear it. Tom would have to get the cat's attention in another way. But how? Then Tom saw Henry's parakeet. It was in a cage near the window in Henry's room. If I let the parakeet out of the cage, thought Tom, Henry will jump up to catch it. While he's busy, I'll call Hildy. Poor Tom Little. He forgot how cats feel about birds. Tom climbed up to where the parakeet's cage was hanging. He pulled out a small stick that held the cage door shut. As soon as the door opened, a bird flew out. Henry saw the parakeet fly over his head. He jumped to his feet and began to chase the bird around the room. The cat stood on Henry's bed and looked wildly about her. Tom ran from the windowsill to the bed and leaped onto the cat's neck. "To the cellar, Hildy," Tom commanded. Then Hildy saw the bird. She leaped up into the air. Tom dug his hands into Hildy's fur and held on with all his might. In one great cat leap, Hildy went from the bed to the top of Henry's dresser, halfway across the room. Her eyes glittered. The green and yellow bird flew around Henry's room. It bumped into the walls and the window, trying to find a way out. Henry climbed over furniture, grabbing at the parakeet. Hildy leaped from the dresser to the bed, to Henry's desk, and back to the bed. Tom closed his eyes and held on. He was beginning to feel seasick from the ride. Finally, Henry saw that Hildy was chasing the bird too. "Ma, Ma," he shouted, "get Hildy out of here. I'm trying to get the bird back into its cage." Mrs. Big came running. For a moment, Tom didn't know what to do. He couldn't jump off Hildy's neck without being killed. At least that is what he thought. But if he stayed there, Mrs. Big would see him. Tom decided to try to hide from Mrs. Big without getting off the cat. Hand over hand, the tiny boy moved around the cat's neck until he was underneath. He needed all his strength. Tom ached all over. His arms were tired. He knew he couldn't hang on much longer. "Oh, please, Mrs. Big," he whispered, "help me." Finally, just as Tom could stand it no longer, Mrs. Big grabbed the cat. She walked quickly with her to the cellar door. Slam, click. It was cool and dark. Hildy and Tom were alone in the cellar. It was just where Tom wanted to take Hildy in the first place.